tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good morning, everyone. So today we are going to continue with our lectures on Chittaja Rūpas. Last time we talked how a person is performing physical and verbal activities during the sleep, while someone is asleep. But today we are going to discuss on how activities, physical and verbal activities occur during a non-human possession. As a religion or a doctrine related to spirituality, obviously Theravada advocates about spirits. Spirits means beings other than humans and animals. So mostly these spirits are not visible to our naked eye, but time to time there are incidences in which these spirits came into the form of a human, or sometimes they manifested themselves to the humans and animals. Then it's also a fundamental that sometimes these spirits includes non-humans, the demons and petas, and also the asuras, means vinipatika asuras, and then the deities who are up to the level of Mara even. These beings can possess another person, another being. So collectively I will be calling them non-humans because they are other than the humans. And these non-humans, amanussas, this includes devas, can possess the other beings. Possessing means taking over the control of the mind stream and the physical body of the living being. And it's a very interesting topic. What are the aspects that we need to focus while a possession happens? The fundamental, it can happen in three ways actually. Rather than going into possession directly, we have to say non-humans can influence the other beings. Some can influence the body of the others. Non-humans can influence our bodies, and it can cause sickness and sometimes difficulties. Sometimes the non-humans can influence the mind of another person, bringing objects, showing certain objects. It can happen mostly during sleep. There are instances, occasions where non-humans have presented certain objects to the mind while the being is asleep. So these objects are seen as dreams. Then the third types of influence is possessing the human being, possessing the living being. Possession means, now in the first two occasions, the non-human causes some effect to the human body or the living being's body. On the other case, it affects the mind of the living being. And then in the third occasion of possession, it takes control over the mind stream and eventually the verbal and physical activities. The non-human governs, regulates what the being is doing. So this is the most important topic, and it's very difficult to explain the mechanism behind this, but it is a fundamental accepted norm in the Theravada teachings that a non-human could possess a body of another person, not only the body, then he takes over the control over the entire mind stream, and then he happens to influence the physical and verbal activities as well. There are many instances where Mara possessed certain beings and acted, and the being was acting on the will of the Mara. So there are such instances. So today we are going to talk what is going on, what is happening during such a possession. Obviously, in order to perform a physical activity, one has to have Chittaja Rūpas produced by the consciousness. There is no argument in it. Now, while doing voluntary activities, involuntary instinctive activities driven by habits or vasana, the person was Sometimes he may not be aware in instinctive activities, but still there is a slight awareness. Those are all are deliberate activities. So even the instinctive activities, if it is not a mere physical event, like when someone hit the elbow, sometimes a jerk happens. These are mere physical activities. If there was an intention, it may be a sudden instinctive reaction, but still the mind, the consciousness is involved. When the consciousness has a desire or an intention to perform a certain action, the chitta rūpas will be produced as a result of this consciousness, and then the body starts to move or perform the act. That's the normal procedure. During sleep, while dreaming, yes, physical activities and verbal activities are obviously possible, but the mind is in a very weak state. Still, the function is consciousness arises, chitta rūpas arise, and the physical and verbal activity occurs. Now, during a non-human possession, there are two opinions among the Theravada scholars of the ancient era. It's obviously chitta rūpas have to be present, and the consciousness should be involved. The question is, whose consciousness is doing the activity? Because in a non-human possession, while possessed by a non-human, we know that the person acts weirdly. There are certain incidences recorded in the recent, but if you look into it in terms of biological, medical aspect, one may say there is an imbalance in the chemicals, and there is no such a thing called a non-human possession. It's the person itself acting weirdly due to some imbalance or kind of a defect in the physical body. So when we come to the Theravada doctrine, we accept or we believe and we advocate a non-physical entity called the consciousness. Some would call this as some have, if I remember, John Searle called it the ghost in the machine, which cannot be proven in terms of science. But anyway, we advocate a consciousness, a non-physical consciousness, the only way to get rid of determinism. The only possible way. If you want to have a free will, there's no other way other than having a non-physical entity that can influence the physical entity. That's the only way out. And Theravadins of that idea, and they advocate a free will. If there is determinism, if there is only physicalism, there cannot be a free will. There is a school of philosophers called compatibilism. They try to explain that the determinism and free will are possible to exist together, but that is very highly, but in the end, still they don't go away from the deterministic universe. So within the determined universe, they are talking about a free will. The free will that we talk, Theravadians talk, is a will that can change the future. You can make your own course of future. That's the free will that most of the people advocate. It's the general common sense. In order to have that, you have to have a non-physical entity. So while we are living in normal conditions, we have two entities, the physical and non-physical. During a non-human possession, what happens is another entity, another living being who is constituted with a subtle matter and the consciousness influences the body. First, we need to understand how the person is influenced, how the being is influencing us. Then the question comes, while the being is acting weirdly, the possessed being is acting weirdly, whose consciousness is working? Whose consciousness is responsible for these verbal and physical activities? To whom the karma is accumulated? And whose chitta rūpas are functioning? So these are the points that we are going to discuss. So this lecture would extend for most probably 2 or 3 weeks, another two lectures most probably, because we are going to scrutinize all these aspects in terms of karma, in terms of the literature, and in terms of the logic based on the fundamental facts of Theravada. So therefore, first we should know, now these are the highlighted points. What is a possession? How the Theravadians would define this. So first we need to stick to the Theravada fundamentals. Then what is the possession? How the mind works during a possession. Because now what I was telling was now we have a non-physical entity in our body which we call the consciousness, which associates the body, which depends on the body, and based on which the physical body is moving. What happens is another being comes into the body. Now there are things to be discussed. What is this entering? Okay, then we'll come to that point later. Now another being is coming. Now in this being we have another two entities. A subtle matter, it's still a matter, Rūpa, which is subtler than ours, and then a consciousness. So that being also possesses consciousness. So now the question is, whose consciousness, whether it's my consciousness or his or the non-human's consciousness, is responsible for my physical and verbal activities during a possession, non-human possession. That's the main opinions among the scholars of this, the disagreement or two different opinions. Then the question comes, how a possession happens? What is the fundamental explanation about a possession? Does the being enters into the body? Does it stay outside and regulate our mind? That's the next point. Then we have to go into understand who accumulate. Now in terms of understanding whose consciousness is responsible for these physical and verbal activities, who gets the karma? Who accumulates the karma? According to the literature, short and sweet, the karma is done by the non-human, not the possessed. If, for instance, if I happen to be possessed by a non-human and act weirdly here, or to kill a certain animal, or kill a chicken and eat raw without cooking the flesh, so the karma, I would not be accumulating any karma for this activity, but the non-human will. So how do we bring them all and explain the mechanism behind this weird phenomena of a non-human possession? So therefore we'll go into explain these points in detail. I hope you got a handout. This is one part of the non-human possession, handout about non-human possessions. I'll be giving more handouts, the remaining parts, in the coming lectures. There are a lot of footnotes taken from the literature because this is a topic that we normally don't discuss in detail. But I found it very interesting. We talked how beings act during sleep, how the for example, emission of semen happens during a sleep. And we also talked how sweating and all these extracts happen due to the mind. We haven't talked that, we'll be talking it later. And then we also talked about how volunteer and involuntary activities happen during with the influence of the mind, with the involvement of the mind. So since this topic is not much discussed, I had to bring lots of footnotes or references in order to show from where I brought all these ideas. So now acting during a non-human possession. So there are three ways it can happen. Possessing the living being, 169.1. In this type of influence, the non-human takes over the control of the mind stream of the possessed and control verbal and physical actions of the being. Possessing a living being by a non-human is called avisana or gahana, taking in Pali. He took the being, or avisana. He possessed the being. He completely enters into the being. Influencing the physical body of the living being. We saw this in the Mara Tajjaniya Sutta. Mara entered the body or the stomach of Venerable Mahamoggallana and brought some discomfort. Influencing the mind of the living being. There are instances where non-humans brought or showed certain objects or gave some ideas to the living beings. So first we need to define what is the avisana. Avisana is the possession of a non-human. As the commentaries state, during a non-human possession, during a non-human possession, the non-human enters the body of the living being. If this is a living being, the non-human enters the body of the living being. Pavisati, enters. Pavisati. And then regulates the entire life. There are two aspects, mainly we can say two elements, physical and immaterial elements. After taking the physical non-immaterial element into possession, control, under the control, is then the non-human can completely control the verbal and physical activities of the living being. Because all the physical and verbal activities are done by the immaterial element of consciousness. Now, according to the commentarial statements, the non-human is entering into the living being's body. But however, the sub-commentators, what the sub-commentators are suggesting, what happens during a possession is the non-human controls the life of the living being. It controls the life of the living being, and as if the non-human has entered. As if the non-human has entered. As if the non-human has entered. So this indicates, seems like either the sub-commentators are not sure whether the living being is not entering, whether it's entering or not, but somehow it's controlling. But the commentators say they are entering. Sub-commentators say why it is mentioned in the commentaries entering, because after the possession, it seems like the possessed acts as the non-humans enter into the body. So what does this mean? It seems he may enter or may not enter according to Theravada tradition. May or may not. But obviously to divine observation, if someone has the divine eye, he should be able to see whether he has entered or not. No argument in that. No argument in that. So we'll just satisfy with what the literature supports us, gives us. So I shall read the 170. When a non-human possesses a living being, the entity takes control of the verbal and physical activities of the host. Host is the possessed being. His body is the host actually. In commentaries, possession is explained as the non-human entering the body of the living being who is being possessed. I have given the footnotes in bold letters. If you look into the number 2 footnote, Dakma Parisajjang Anva visitvati ekassa Brahma Parisajjat Sariram Pavisitva, having entered the body of a certain Brahma. So Acharyasya Sarire Ajhavasitva, Sarire Adimuchati, Sarire Adimuchitva, all these shows that the non-human has entered into the body of the living being. However, according to sub-commentaries, in such instances, the non-human does not physically enter the body of the possessed. In commentaries, it is stated that non-human enters the body of the living being because after being possessed, the actions of the host occur as if the non-human has entered the body of the living being. So it shows that, if you go into footnote number 3, Sarire Adimuchatiti Sarirang Anupavisitva Via Avisanto. So he possesses the living being as if he has entered. That's the point here. As if he has entered. In the next footnote, you can say Tata Abhibhavato He tassa sarirang pavitto viyahoti iti vuttang. Sariram pavisittvati. The commentators say that it has entered into the body because it seems like the host is acting as if there is someone is in the body. The next, so these are the footnotes. Therefore, the sub-commentators are very clear on this. Though the commentary says it enters into the body, so the non-human is, it seems like the host is having the non-human inside the body. So it indicates that the non-human is not sure to actually enter into the body of the host. So that's the point. So now there's the first thing, which will be again analyzed when it comes to the in the future lectures. As sub-commentary state, during a non-human possession, the non-human entity does not let the being to function according to the mind of the being. So after a possession, the living being loses his, we can say, the freedom or the free will. What is freedom? How a being is considered free? So it loses the freedom. It loses the freedom. What is meant as a free? What is meant as free here? Now, if the living being is capable of acting according to its desire or will, then the person is free. The person is free. But after a possession, the living being cannot act according to its desire, according to its will. It's acting according to the intention or desires or objectives of the non-human. So when a living being is possessed by a non-human, it loses its freedom. The host loses the freedom. It cannot act according to its wish. The non-human determines that the living being may function according to his or her desire, according to the desire of the non-human. This is called the non-human taking control of the living being it possesses. At that time, the mind stream of the living being falls under the control of the non-human. When the mind stream of the living being is subjugated to the control of the non-human, being's physical body too falls under its control, under the dominance of the non-human. The phenomenon is called overpowering the life of the living being. So what happens is, after possessing, now according to sub-commentaries, the non-human is not sure to enter the body. From outside it seems that it has entered the body. But after possessing the living being, what happens is, the living being's mind stream is not functioning according to the being's desire. It's been completely taken over by the non-human. Now it's functioning according to the desire of the non-human. That's the point here, according to the desire of the non-human. Then, so now later we will find out that there are two opinions. Either this mind stream would be prevented, stopped to some extent, right? It doesn't mean that it goes into the Nirodha Samapatti. The functioning of the Javana consciousness will be prevented. So either the mind is in a Bhavanga state or some other weak consciousnesses are happening. Or otherwise, while the being is having his own consciousness, it's entirely taken over by the non-human. We'll come into the two opinions soon, after a while. Now, the non-human takes the control over the mind stream of the living being. When the mind stream is taken into control, under the control, what happens? The physical body also falls under the control or the dominance of the non-human, because physical and verbal activities happen according to the intentions of the mind. As the mind functions, we act and talk according to the nature of our mind, our desires, objectives. So therefore, now the entire life, mind and matter, matter, both are under the control of the non-human. This is called overpowering the living being, dominating the living being, overcoming the living being. Abhibhavati or adhibhavati. Now the living being loses its freedom. It has become like a puppet of the non-human. Become like the puppet of the non-human. On other occasions, sometimes the non-human may present certain objects to the mind. This is a different case. The living being may see various objects, but it doesn't mean that it loses its control over its physical or verbal activities. So he may not act weird. He may get astonished, or he may become afraid of the various objects shown by the non-human. Possible. Sometimes the non-human may cause physical discomfort to the body of the living being. That's also possible. That's also possible. But in this possession, what happens? The entire life, nama, rūpa, are under the control of the non-human. This is a very weird state. So it loses the freedom. Loses the freedom. To the extent that the activities which were done, the living being is not responsible for them as well. So therefore, the living being does not accumulate any demerit or merit for doing such activity. Now we go into what is the functioning of non-human. So I hope it's clear till now. According to the commentaries, the non-human enters the body. The sub-commentators say no. It is as if the non-human has entered. It's not that it has really entered. They are not sure. They don't give a clear statement whether the non-human is outside or inside. They even doesn't say it is not inside. Because in some places of commentaries it has mentioned it's not easy to judge whether it's inside or outside. This is mentioned in the Dhammasangani commentary while explaining Mahabhutas. Then the Paramattadipani states that it is not clear to a person who does not possess the divine eye. Obviously, if one possesses the divine eye and if it is capable of seeing a certain non-human, surely the person would be able to see where the non-human is located during a possession. Obviously, it is possible. Right? So, for that we have to go into practical observations, the one who has the real divine eye and actually one who seizes it. So, in order to do that, if you want to bring it into a practical observation, then we have to test him whether he is capable of seeing certain objects beyond our normal visible observation. So, whether he'll be able to exactly locate certain things beyond the wall or something very far, what the person is doing. So, one has to test them properly first. Then they can come into the conclusion whether he has that capacity. Then at least we can come into a belief whether he is actually seeing the non-human or not. Right. Anyway, according to the fundamentals, if a person possesses the divine eye, surely he'll be able to see whether the non-human is inside or outside. The sub-commentators are silent on this and they doesn't give an exact answer for this. They say what the commentators say as entering is after the possession, because after the possession the host works or acts as if a non-human is inside his body. Now how the mind works? How the mind works a non-human possession? There is no unanimously agreed theory on this within the Theravada. There are two opinions of two different schools. We don't know who are the different schools, but there were two different groups of teachers who had these two opinions. This was in ancient time, not recently. These are recorded in the sub-commentaries. The first opinion, according to the first opinion, what they are saying is, during a non-human possession, we don't need to talk about the Panchadvarika Chittas. Panchadvarika Chittas, according to both the opinions, Panchadvarika Chittas are the consciousnesses of the host. There is no disagreement in it. Panchadvarika Chittas. Panchadvarika Chittas belongs to the host. It means seeing and also whatever the consciousness is arising in that mind stream. In that mind stream. Then, in that mind stream. The disagreement is about the Kiriyamaya Chittas. Kiriyamaya. Kiriyamaya Chittas are the consciousnesses with which we can act verbally, physically or mentally. Perform certain activities. This excludes the mere act of cognition. What are the mental activities that are related to these chittas? For instance, thinking, meditating, pondering, concluding something. All are done with powerful javana consciousnesses. Nothing to say about, there's nothing to say about physical and verbal activities. So, Kiriyamaya Chittas are the ones, consciousnesses that are responsible in doing actions. Here we can mainly refer to the verbal and physical activities, and also it should include mental activities because we perform having thought. We perform acts having thought. Now, what happens to these Kiriyamaya Chittas? Normally, in the ultimate sense, Kiriyamaya Chitta includes Kusala Chittas, Akusala Chittas, and even Kiriya Chittas of Arahants. But it is impossible for a non-human to entirely possess the life of a noble being. It's not possible. They cannot possess a noble being. It's also a fundamental. So, as an Arahant is a noble being, the highest noble being, it is impossible that these Kiriya Chittas are involved in a non-human possession. It is recorded in the Brahma, the sutra for which there was a sutra in which a Mara possessed two Brahmas, Ekasya Brahma Parisajjat, one Brahma, once the Mara possessed, one Brahma. So it is possible to possess beings who have jhanas or who are born in the Brahma realm. It's possible. But it is not possible to possess a noble being. So therefore, these Kiriyamaya Chittas include Kusala Chittas and Akusala Chittas because it's always a Putujjana who is being possessed. The host has to be a Putujjana. It's another fundamental. Then one may ask the question, what happened to Venerable Ananda? Venerable Ananda's case, Mara didn't possess him. He just showed certain dreadful objects to him. So he was unable to focus on what the Buddha was telling. And it was not, he was like, he showed certain objects to Venerable Ananda. Buddha knew the Mara was doing that, but he didn't prevent him. And Venerable Ananda was unable to focus and understand what the Buddha was telling. So now, these Kiriyamaya Chittas, now the two opinions are, according to one opinion, these Kiriyamaya Chittas will be prevented. Prevented doesn't mean he is stopping the entire mind stream, no. Panchadvarika Chittas are arising in the host, conscious stream is continuing. Either we can have two options here. The mind stream falls into the Bhavanga, or he is having very weak consciousnesses, because you cannot always have Panchadvarika Vitis. He is having some weak consciousnesses by which he is not able to perform certain physical, verbal activities. Still, it has to be Javana in that context. If it is not Bhavanga, because Javanas have to arise, or it has to be Parittaramana Vitis of the five sense doors, or Mindo Vitis that end with Tadalam, Vattabana. There are some Vitis like that. So, the mind process, just Vattabana Chitta or the Manodvara Vajana Chitta is arising, and it doesn't go into the javana of consciousness. Or it has to be weak javanas that are incapable of performing verbal, physical activities or doing any productive act. Then the other opinion is, then the question comes, it prevents the person's consciousness, and then it completely dominates the mind stream of the living being. Then there's another statement here. Activities, the verbal and physical activities done by the host, whether they were done. Now, what these teachers are saying, it prevents the natural kiriyame chittas, pakati kiriyame chittas. So it's natural kiriyame chittas means the javana chittas that happen to us ordinary. So in that sense, I would take away this statement because now because I forgot that the pakati chittas, it prevents the continuation of natural kiriyame chittas. So what happens is, it seems like we don't need to worry about getting into bhavanga or anything. Now the consciousness is still happening, according to this. Consciousness is still happening. It loses its natural state. That's the point here. It loses its natural state. So it's some kind of a weird consciousness is happening. Then verbal and physical activities are done. They are saying it's not possible to exactly say whether these verbal and physical activities were done by the consciousness of the host or by the consciousness of the non-human. This is the point here. So just forget about this bhavanga and weak consciousness. I made a mistake there. I actually forgot this point. So what happens is, now I'll repeat their argument. What is happening according to them? Panchadvarika chittas belongs to the host. There's no argument in it. Now kiriyame chittas, normal ordinary kusala or kiriya chittas, kusala or akusala chittas are happening. The ordinary consciousness stream is prevented. It doesn't mean that the consciousness falls into bhavanga or consciousness stops. The ordinary consciousness are prevented. So now the kiriyame chittas, javana chittas of the host are acting weirdly. They have lost their natural nature. The sane quality is lost. Now, for example, when we are having consciousnesses, there is some kind of a natural status in them. Natural status in them. So we find now if it changes, the others would find out my mind is completely different. What has happened to you? You seems weird today. So if I am acting normally, my consciousnesses are in a normal natural state. Such consciousnesses are prevented. It means consciousness are still happening and they are in a weird state. Then what happens? Activities are done. Those teachers suggest it is not possible to say exactly those activities were done by these weird consciousnesses of the host or by the consciousness of the non-human. That's the point here. Then, according to the second theory, yes, Panchadvarika chittas belongs to the host, no argument in it. Kiriyame chittas are affected by the non-human. They lose their natural nature, obviously, as in this first theory. They lose their natural status. Pakating vijahati. They lose their natural status. And then these activities are done by these weird consciousnesses of the host, not by the non-human. In the first theory, it's not possible to say whether the activities were done by the non-human or the host. Here, the activities are done by the host, influenced by consciousnesses of the host, influenced by the non-human. So these are the two arguments, two opinions. Just slight difference is there. In the first opinion, it's possible to say whether the consciousness, the activities were done by the human or the non-human, being or the non-human. In the other theory, yes, it's done by the host with consciousnesses influenced, highly influenced, completely taken over by the non-human. So we'll go into the two opinions. During a non-human position, first opinion, non-human position, during a non-human position, the non-human prevents the happening of the ordinary javana consciousnesses, which can do verbal physical actions, pakati kiriyame chitta, and make the possessed being do verbal and physical activities the non-human desires. Okay, the non-human is acting now, the mind has lost the natural quality. This is done with the psychic power of the non-human, that is the psychic ability of the non-human. It is not possible to exactly say, it is not possible exactly to say whether those verbal and physical activities were done with the minds of the non-human or with the minds of the possessed. That's the point here. It's not exactly possible to say. This is an incomprehensible phenomenon of the karma vipaka iddhi. That is the capacity the non-human possesses to take control of the mind stream of someone else. We don't have that capacity. Obviously, we don't have that capacity. That is a capacity only possessed by non-humans. Animals do not have it. Hell beings do not have it. Humans do not have it. Only some devas have it, and Mara obviously possess this capacity. Some petas do have it. Some certain minipatikasuras, non-humans possess this. So this is one sort of psychic ability they inherit by their birth, possessing the capacity to possess someone else. In the second opinion, as consciousnesses pertain to the five senses which arise in the possessed body during a non-human possession belongs to the possessed being. Now, so it shows that there is no disagreement with the other opinion in that regard. Panchadvarika chittas belongs to the host, because even in the first opinion they are talking only about the kiriyame chittas. Panchadvarika chittas belong to the host. The kiriyame chittas too belongs to the possessed. Chittas too belong to the possessed. What happened during a possession is that those functioning consciousnesses, kiriyame chittas, lose their ordinary status due to the power of the non-human. So according to them, the activities are done by the mind of the possessed while they are being highly influenced by the non-human. That's the point. Now we shall see the following imperative points when analyzing the two opinions. According to both opinions, Panchadvarika chittas that arise during a non-human possession belong to the possessed being. That's the point. One point here. This will be challenged in future with some evidences. I'll be talking about. This is a very interesting topic. I'll take it for maybe another 2 lectures. So these things may be challenged to some extent. So according to both opinions, Panchadvarika chittas that arise during a non-human possession belong to the possessed being. Both opinions suggest that the ordinary nature of kiriyame chittas are the consciousness by which we can perform verbal, physical and certain mental activities. Right? The ordinary nature of those kiriyame chittas change during a non-human possession. So he loses his normal status. It doesn't come into the normalcy. It acts weirdly. The consciousness is being affected. So the being is the person. If a monkey is being possessed, he is completely free from all the offenses during this possession. He is completely free during that time. Then the difference in opinions. Now two points are sharedly agreed. Panchadvarika chittas belongs to the host. And then the kiriyame chitta, the nature of the kiriyame chittas change. The difference in opinions lies in between determining to whose chittas the verbal and physical actions must be attributed during a non-human possession. According to the first opinion, this idea is incomprehensible. It is not possible to understand. According to the second view, those actions are done by the chittas of the possessed beings, while the non-human controls them according to its desire. So it's being done by the possessed being, it's been done by the possessed being, while the non-human is controlling them. So now this seems, now we have to understand one point. Sometimes we can do karmas through ordering. If I order a certain person to kill, I order A to kill B. B is doing the action, but I have paved the path for the death of B. So I have been instrumental in the death. Instrumental in this death. Instrumental means I have been causal. I have been a cause of this death. Or otherwise we can say, I was the real agent of this death, and I made A as the instrument to reach my target. My end was to kill B. Instead of I myself doing it, I did it through B. I did it through A. And A also accumulates certain karma, obviously karma of killing. And I too accumulates the karma of killing by making someone to kill another being through ordering. Now this is not what the non-human is doing, is somewhat similar to this. The non-human, instead of ordering, have completely taken control over the mind stream of the possessed being and made him to act. The difference lies now in an ordering. When I order A to kill B, while I am accumulating the karma of killing, obviously A too accumulates the karma of killing, because he is the executor in the end. He is the one who does the activity with the dosa mula chitta. I am just doing the ordering. For instance, I order A to kill B, and A misunderstands my information and thinks my intention is to kill C, and A kills C. What happens is, I am free from the karma of killing a being. I have the karma of ordering, no doubt about that, but I am not responsible of the death of C, because my intention was to kill B. I am not responsible for the death of C actually, because my intention was to kill B. And he misunderstood the information, somehow he killed C. But he is fully responsible for the killing. If A and I myself were monks, while A becomes parajika, I will be free from the parajika. I will not be committing the parajika, because my order was wrongly executed. And A is involved in killing, no doubt about that. But in the non-human position, what happens? When the non-human is regulating the mind stream of the living being, completely taking control of the living being, only the non-human accumulates the karma, good or bad deeds, during this possessed period. The possessed is not accumulating any karma of the activities that he is doing. Obviously, every javana chitta that is happening will become a karma due to the influence of the anusaya or the latent defilements. But he is not accumulating a karma, he is not responsible for the karmas that were done, the physical and verbal activities that were done. For example, if a non-human possessed, if I am a non-human and possessed A and kill B, A is not responsible, he is not accumulating the karma of killing B, while I will be accumulating the entire karma. But in the ordering case, I order A to kill B, both A and I myself are responsible for the karma. So there is a huge difference here. Now the non-human takes control over the mind stream of the possessed being and makes it to do what the non-human desires. It's a very subtle point. It's a very deep, actually in terms of Theravada teaching, this is a very deep point. I'll be scrutinizing this idea with a lot of information in the coming 2 weeks. So now the disagreement lays in determining whether the actions the chittas of verbal and physical activities belong to the host or belong to the non-human. What does it mean? Obviously, hosting having certain consciousnesses. In the end, the ultimate execution was done by whose consciousness? What does it mean? What does it mean? Whose consciousness are producing the chitta rupas? Whose consciousness are making the activity? Is it the non-human's consciousness or is it the host's consciousness? According to one opinion, incomprehensible. According to another, it is the host who is doing. But who gets the karma? That's the point here. That's the weird point here, the fishy thing. The non-human gets the karma. So with all these ideas, we move on to understand what the non-human possession is. So I'll be concluding the lecture. There are a few other things to be discussed. I'll take them to the next week. I'll just briefly explain, and next day I'll be talking on them in detail with some stories. Well, very nice stories are there. So I feel instead of just going through without mentioning them, at least giving some detail about the stories, I feel it's better to explain them at least to some extent, so the audience would have a better understanding about the Theravada literature as well. Because when we are studying Dhamma, it's not only studying the theory or the deep Abhidhamma, we also need to understand the context based on the stories under which they are explained. So next day I'm going to talk, and also some other information. Non-humans possess living beings with various objectives. More details about non-human. What are the objectives? Now after enumerating these objectives, listing these objectives, then we'll start to scrutinize again these two opinions and define what is a non-human possession. Sometimes they possess the living beings and perform various activities. Sometimes they possess the living being and perform various activities. They may have different objectives. Some non-humans get their nutriment requirements with the help of the body of another living being. There was a story where a non-human possessed a monk and he ate raw flesh and blood of pigs. They went into the slaughterhouse. The monk went into the slaughterhouse, pig slaughterhouse, and ate raw meat and blood, which is prohibited for monks. Monks cannot eat raw fish, raw meat. It has to be cooked to some extent. But in this regard, when this happened, Buddha gave an allowance. During a non-human possession, it is possible. The commentators say, actually what happened was, it was not the monk who ate the meat or drank the blood. It was the non-human who got it done. And it had his nutritious requirements. Or maybe it wanted to taste the flavor. So in that regard, what happens? It means the non-human is also experiencing the taste of the blood or the meat. So then it comes to the consciousness question, whether the non-human was outside the body or whether he was inside the body, how he could feel the taste if it is not inside the body. Now this leads to the question of the original definition. Is it actually entering the body, or is it as if the non-human has entered the body? So this we are going to re-challenge the definition given there. Then sometimes non-humans possess living beings to convey messages to others. Also commonly seen in these days. But I am not in a hasty to say that every possession, the claimed possession today that are happening are obvious possessions. So obviously there are some mistaken events. But according to the literature, and according to a person who believes in the spirit, yes, obviously, it's possible to have. So when a Theravadian looks into a person who is acting weirdly, it can be a physical imbalance of the elements or chemicals, whatever you call them, or it can be an influence of the past karma, or it can be influence due to the excessive nature of defilements that are active in the person's mind. And also, there is another slight window for the possession of a non-human. So these are the options that we get. When a Theravada is looking into a person who is acting weirdly and lost the natural nature, natural status of the mind, It can be he's completely insane due to strong defilements, or that insanity may be caused due to a physical reason, imbalance of the elements or the chemicals or whatever, sickness or something. Or it can be caused by a past karma. Yes, obviously, karma can be a cause for insanity or to act weirdly. And then there's also a possibility of a non-human possession, right? So this is a very interesting topic. So what we discussed so far today is how the non-human possession is defined in the commentaries. According to it, the non-human is entering the body. Commentator says as if the non-human has entered the body, because the way the person acts seems like it is inside the body. So it's actually not it indicates that it may not be inside the body. It may not be inside the body. And this Dhammasangani commentary, I didn't give you the reference here. Information here says that it's not possible to exactly say whether the non-human is inside or outside. In the Paramattha state, this is for the ones who do not possess divine eye, and according to the fundamental, it's clear if someone possesses the divine eye and is able to see, is capable to see the non-human. Obviously, during the non-human possession, he'll be able to see whether he's outside or inside. It's a very obvious and simple argument. Then the two opinions. The two opinions are whose consciousness are responsible for this physical and verbal activity. So according to one theory, we cannot say exactly whether it's the non-human's consciousnesses or is the host's consciousnesses. Then, because it's something that is incomprehensible, achinteya dhammata, because it's one of the capacities, psychic capacities, the non-human possesses by birth or due to being born as a non-human. We don't have this. Animals don't have this. Then the other idea is, no, they are done by the consciousnesses of the host. Then all are in the agreement that the Panchadvarika Chittas belong to the host, and then the nature of the Kiriyame Chittas do change during a non-human possession, and it loses the Kiriyame Chittas of the host loses its actual nature, natural nature, and is acting weirdly. So the problem lays, the disagreement lays, the question lays whether these Kiriyame Chittas, obviously you should have Kiriyame Chittas to perform verbal activities, physical activities, whether they were done by the Kiriyame Chittas of the host or exclusively by the non-human itself. So this is the obvious question. So with that being said, I'll conclude this lecture, and next time we are going to talk about certain nice stories of non-human possessions, and then we're going to scrutinize those stories. Based on those stories, we are going to redefine the possession of non-humans again, and then we will try to find out how to understand the accumulation of karma during a non-human possession and what would be the most suitable definition for us to accept. Okay, I conclude the lecture, giving the opportunity to ask questions.
May I ask my question?
Yes.
So I'm answer. Now we have heard that evil spirits enter humans' bodies and they can cause illnesses and prolong the already existing illnesses also. And my question is, why do they enter human bodies? I think they enter human bodies mostly to quench their thirst, hunger, things like that. Because that was their eternal problems. They are always living, affected by hunger and thirst. And my other question is, can an external cause remove them when they enter the body? External cause like exorcist. Can an exorcist some power, spiritual, magical power can remove that type of persons? Most sociologists thinks, not directly they hints in their writing, that powerful mind cannot be possessed. The powerful persons cannot be possessed by these this evil, especially evil spirits things. Now, I think that powerful means that the people living according to the Buddhist tenets and things like that. My question is, why do they enter into the human beings, and can an external cause remove them doing exorcisms like magical powers like that?
Okay, thank you for question. Yes, there are few objectives. I have given it in the handout. One objective is to fulfill their nutritious requirements. It's not the only objective, because we find sometimes they possess to human beings to kill others. Bahya Daruchirya was killed by a female demon who possessed a oxen, a cow actually, yeah, who possessed a cow. And then we have a story of one of the wise men in the Umagga Jataka, Kaminda. He acted like a mad dog during the new moons after being possessed by a demon called Naradeva. And sometimes they possess to convey a certain message. So it's not only the nutritious requirements that make them to possess another being. That's one of them. That's not the only reason. I'll talk about them in next week. Then can an external force remove them from the body? Or then the next question is, now according to the definition given in the sub-commentaries, now they are not sure whether they are entering or not, but we take it as they are entering, okay. So can we chase them away from the body, or can we cut off the influence through an external power? The Theravada doesn't prevent a possibility of such a possibility, because the physical world can obviously affect the non-physical world, the mind, the other living beings. There is a way of killing recognized in the commentaries that could be done through black magic, Vijjamaya Payoga. There are 6 ways a being can be killed. A monk may still commit parajika for doing all these 6, but it's not possible. Yeah, there are 6 ways. Rarely all 6 can be possible, but mostly sahatta by his own hands, or using his own bodies, maybe strangling or hitting someone to the head. And then nissaggyena, throwing something or shooting at someone, shooting with an arrow. Then anatya, ordering someone to kill. Then Thavarapayoga. Thavarapayoga means digging pits, setting up bombs, time bombs, or keeping swords or weapons near a person who is pondering of suiciding. These are called Thavarapayoga. Then we have Vijjamaya and Iddhimaya. Iddhimaya is exclusive for certain beings. Normally that is possessed by non-humans. It says that Kuera, before his enlightenment as a Sotapanna, was when he got angry and looked at certain non-humans, they died. Instantly they died due to his look. And there's a story about a king, if I remember, Sri Lankan king, when he got angry and shouted or looked at someone, the person died. So this is attributed, I don't know whether he got a heart attack or not, according to today's standards. Somehow, according to the tradition, it is attributed to the king's power he possessed. That's the splendor or the strong, powerful personality that he possessed. It's not a good thing to have, so but anyhow he had it. So this is called Iddhimaya, some kind of a strange supernatural capacity one possesses by birth. Then Vijjamaya. Vijjamaya is black magic. Black magic. So Theravada accepts the idea, black magic, doing some physical stuff, external stuff, can influence and even kill a living being. That's the weird thing here. You can kill a living being through black magic. So there's no hindrance for a devil dancer to a spiritual activist, I mean like those ones who are involved with demons, to chase away a spirit or a non-human who has possessed a living being. According to Theravada, that is surely possible. So that's what normally we see in day-to-day lives. There are people who claim to be devil dancers, and they cure certain people who are in weird states, who claim to have possessed non-humans. So according to Theravada fundamentals, it's obviously possible.
Thank you very much. My question is on a more fundamental level. Actually, if you take human and a non-human interaction, fundamentally we have two mental process lineages and two physical or material form lineages. If I say it in Sinhala, Nama Paramparava and Rūpa Paramparava as one Santana and the other Santana. So that's the what we are talking about is actually how they interact with each other. Mainly the control goes to the non-human, so therefore he is overpowering in this situation. And whatever the objectives are, how a person can influence it. Here actually I need to mention a little about hypnosis also. A human being also can get another human being to do things which he would otherwise not do through hypnosis. That is, I don't know, there must be a psychologist who should be able to explain how it works. But if we go back to that Santana analysis, so what you said, the two opinions, I understood based on that. First one is the non-human doesn't enter as such into the body, but staying outside influence the mental processes of the human, and through that he can get the person to do things whatever he wishes rather than that human wishes. So that is taking control of the two Chitta and Rūpa Paramparas of the human by an inhuman or some external body, external person. So that is one aspect. The other is he actually, the non-human, takes control of the physical form stream completely. And I am unable to understand then what happens to the mental stream. Probably it may be going to Bhavanga. I think you wrote it and cut it off. But it may be going into Bhavanga because it cannot go to Nirodha. So only possibility is it can go to Bhavanga. And that non-human's mental lineage start taking control of the Chitta Kriya Vayu Dhatu of the human body. And then anything is possible. And even the mind or control also may have been taken by the external non-human. So if I understand what you said in that manner, is it correct? That's what I want to find out.
Yeah, thank you for your explanation. It's first thing is, in both the opinions, they are not exactly saying whether the non-human is entering or outside. That's something that we have to still analyze. Seems like it is entering according to the information that I will be giving you in the future lectures. It seems like it's entering, but so far we haven't discussed about that because the sub-commentators are keeping a non-conclusive statement on this. They are saying according to the commentaries it enters, but what the commentary says as entering is because after the possession, it seems like the non-human is inside the body. So in both the two opinions, it doesn't say whether they enter or not, But the thing is, what you are suggesting is the third opinion that we will be discussing in another 2 weeks. In the first opinion, I will define it again. Both the opinions, the control of the mind is taken by the non-human. No argument in that. So that's why in both the occasions, they lose the natural status of the Kiriyamaya Chittas. The host loses its natural status. So it's been taken over, completely taken over. The disagreement is, now when the physical and verbal activities are done, whose consciousness is exclusively responsible? One says it's done by the host, influenced by the non-human. Because non-human has taken over the control, that's why it loses its capacity. But still the action is done by the host. That's the second view. In the first view, the host has lost the natural nature of the mind and it is performing certain activities, because when you look from outside, the host has lost his mind, is not acting as we would expect him to do that. So that's why we say he has lost his mind, lost the natural state of the mind, but the consciousness is still happening. That's why they are suggesting it's not clear whether the activities were done by the weird consciousness of the host or the non-human's consciousness. In the second opinion, they are done by the weird consciousness of the host. The third opinion, as you are saying, that I will be discussing in another 2 days, the other alternative option would be the host mind goes into bhavanga or to a weak state where it cannot perform any physical verbal activities, and the non-human is doing the non-human's consciousness is doing the activity. So according to that, there is no ambiguity whether he is doing or not, because the karma is accumulated by the non-human. So the non-human's consciousness should be responsible. That would be the third opinion that I will be presenting. But this also may have some difficulties in some occasions, because for example, if a non-human possession happens to many people at the same time, that's another, because in the literature we find sometimes it may possess few beings at the same time, or whether he was possessing the beings at different times quickly. It's another option, another point, because in some occasions we see Mara possessed many beings. It doesn't say whether they were possessed at the same time. If it was possessed if many were possessed at the same time, then this opinion is still challenging. How could one consciousness perform various activities in the various bodies? So as you are suggesting, you are going into the third opinion, which I will be discussing in future. I have done this in Sinhalese classes actually. I am just bringing out the translations of the handouts. So I will be discussing about the third opinion, in which the person's mind goes into a bhavanga or a very weak conscious state, while the non-human's consciousness is exclusively or completely entirely dominating the situation and acting like I enter into a car and drive the car. The car is not responsible for anything. The driver is responsible for all the activities. So like the non-human is fully responsible for whatever actions done by the host. So that will be the third opinion, which we didn't discuss. So far what we discussed is, on both the occasions, Kiriyame Chittas, Javana consciousness are still happening in the host. They have lost their natural status and actions are done. So the first opinion, whether they were done by these weird consciousnesses of the host or by the consciousness of the non-human. Then according to second opinion, no, non-human it's done by the weird consciousness of the host, by the non-human is using it. It's a medium. The host mind is the medium through which the non-human does the activity. So the third opinion would be, it's the non-human who is doing the activity and the host is completely out of the context, and the non-human is completely dominating the body of the living being. For that, it has to enter into the body. So the definition of the sub-commentators have to be reconsidered, because they say as if they have entered, while the commentators say they have entered. They have defined the commentarial explanation. So that's why it needs more broader apprehension into this idea, and that's why I'm bringing some stories, and we'll try to analyze these stories, and with the stories we get more information, unearth more information, and build a path for a third opinion, which will also have some difficulties in explaining certain things.
Thank you. Just one thing to add to that. In the recent story speaker, the person who undergoes this kind of being taken over by a non-human, after the incident, they don't remember anything that was done during that period. So that shows his mental processes either not been working properly, or it would have been in a very weak state, or it was absent.
Yeah, that's will be found in the Sonu Sutta. The discussion of Sonu Samana, I'll be talking about it. He was possessed by his past mother of the past life, and he didn't remember anything. That's also one reason, one point that I'll be bringing to establish the third opinion. I'll be leading this lecture towards the third opinion, what you have discussed so far, what you have suggested. So that will be the end goal, bringing it to the third opinion, but still it will have defects.
Thank you. One last thing is, when you said Mara could influence so many different bodies of different people, what came to my mind was when Chulapantaka, when he became an Arahat, and when somebody visited the temple to invite him for the Dani, he saw those 1,000 heroes. So they are with that superpower, individual, or what you explained last class, those bodies could be controlled with one consciousness, isn't it?
But the problem comes Chitta Kriya Vayu Dhatu.
Yeah.
It doesn't have Chitta Kriya Vayu, it's just a material body, Utuja Rupas. But when we are talking about Vinyati Rupas, when we are talking about Chitta Kriya Vayu Dhatu, that's the problem comes. How can a Chitta Kriya Vayu Dhatu be produced by a consciousness in a different body? That's the obvious question that arises in the end. That's why I said that third opinion has another problem that needs to be solved. So you cannot combine it, because that time it is just a body. There's no Chitta Kriya Vayu Dhatu involved in it.
Yeah, but even when Lord Buddha was delivering the Abhidhamma sermons in
these are Utuja Rupas, right? These are Utuja Rupas. No. These are not Chittaja Rupas were involved in there. Because when we are talking like taking the position of the non-humans and just letting them to act like robots, that's the one opinion. Or whether their Chittaja Rupas are arising. So then the obvious idea would be Chittaja Rupas has to arise in the consciousness in that body. Mara's consciousness cannot be in many bodies at the same time. It's not possible. So then the obvious solution would be, yes, those Chittaja Rupas are produced by the consciousness of the consciousness of the hosts, and Mara is just influencing.
Okay, like every other situation, this is again another very complicated topic.
Yes, that's why. That's why I said even I'll be building up to the third opinion, but the third opinion will also have some difficulties in explaining certain situations. So in the end, I'll be laying down three opinions and just conclude the lecture. Conclude the topic. That would be my final goal.
Thank you very much, and much merits to you.
Okay, I think the questions are done. So I hope you enjoyed the lecture of non-human possession. Next day we are going to talk about some stories in which non-humans possessions had happened in various occasions, and then we'll go into analyze each and every story and take certain elements from each story and build up and redefine the possession of non-humans again, right? So And also this leads to, all these explanations leads to show that consciousness is a different element, body is a different element, and then they are interacting very strongly. And all these doctrines show that there is no self, dominating self, that exists in our existence. So it leads the path towards the non-self doctrine. So wish you all the best, and may this merit help us to attain deep Dhamma knowledge and finally attain the liberation soon. Buddha Sasanang Chirantittatu, Buddha Sasanang Chirantittatu, Buddha Sasanang Chirantittatu, Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu.